When we think of self-destruction, we normally think of all the worst ways in which people harm themselves. But this is not true. Self-destruction is a spectrum, and we're all on that spectrum. Of course, the worst end of the spectrum are people who kick the bucket on their own accord. But where are we on this spectrum? This spectrum comes from a concept called self-hate. Of course, a lot of people don't want to be part of this group. We all want to be like all the healthy people. But I'm like, no, man. We're all kind of on this spectrum, and if we work hard, we're going to become healthier. We all have moments of self-loathing, self-doubt, and even self-hate. But for some, these feelings take on a life of their own, spiraling into a cycle of self-destructive impulses and actions. This can be violent or not violent. They can be conscious or unconscious, but they will affect us physically, emotionally, and spiritually. On the surface, self-destructive actions can appear very harmless, like biting your nails, picking at a rash. But when viewed in the light of their true intention, they reveal a very subconscious drive towards real self-harm. But why do we want to harm ourselves? Well, this comes from self-hate. So the roots of self-hate come from childhood, when the person is not given enough love, attention. It all happens because the people who are going to raise us are not perfect people. Of course, they're going to mistreat us in certain ways. But as children, we cannot afford to get mistakes into our lives. So we develop an idealized image or that person that we want to become that solves all of our issues that we have in childhood. It's not only childhood, even adolescence, toddler age. So the person is like, man, I must become this person to cover up all of my suffering. And then this image, it's like as if it says to them, forget who you are. This is who you should be. So the person sets out on a journey to become this idealized image in their head. So their imagination sets into work. And in this process, the person gives themselves powers, like Superman kind of powers. The person becomes a hero. They become a genius, they become a supreme lover, they become a saint, they become a god. This is all in their head. And they're like, if only I become that, then life will be good. But of course, this godlike image starts to create problems because now we have made a pact with the devil. We have forgotten our real selves and we try to only be that idealized self. And seeing ourselves from that idealized image, we look at our actual self with scorn. We hate him because he's pulling us back. He's like, man, you're not the real thing. I want to be Superman. I don't want to be you. So we start to look down on ourselves. And this is where the self-hate comes. We are hating the real actual self, the person that's here on earth, right? In extreme cases, these self-destructive thoughts come as suicidal thoughts. But they're very quick and they just come and vanish straight from your head. And you don't have time to act on them. Let me say you're just standing on a balcony and you feel a certain urge that's pulling you, to just jump off the building. I don't know if you guys have ever had that feeling. Or maybe you're walking on a road and you feel like there's something pulling you into the cars. Or you're waiting for a train and you feel like something is pulling you into the train. Those are just minor, the self-harm, the self-destructive, these are signs. However, sometimes the urge is too strong that the person has to hold themselves onto something so that they don't actually attempt a suicide. Yeah, but trust me, this is not actually the person wanting to kill themselves. It's just something very slight. And if I may use an anomaly, the person would be even the most surprised to find himself kicking the bucket. But you see, this self-destruction is very tricky because sometimes the mind doesn't want us to consciously know. So it comes in very unconscious ways. So it could be people who think that, nothing can ever happen to me. So they drive recklessly, trying to sabotage themselves. Some swim recklessly. They're swimming with crocodiles and stuff. Of course, it might not be self-hate, but we're asking ourselves, could it be self-hate? Because this kind of feels like self-destruction. Other people, they drink and use lots of drugs, right? They might feel like, they just love alcohol, but it could be the self-destructive tendencies. And remember, they're trying to hide. The person cannot think bad of themselves, right? So it becomes unconscious, but they behave like this. They don't know why. Some people, have a high drive for glamour, so they overwork themselves. They don't sleep. In a way, they're destructing their body, right? So you can see what I'm talking about. It's very unconscious. Sometimes you may just be walking and you trip and you hurt yourself. You might think it's a coincidence, but this could be an unconscious drive of self-hate. Even in the hospitals, very good doctors know that it's a patient's will to recover from illness. Of course, it's not only the will, you need medical help, but a lot of the times it's a patient's wish to come back to life, right? So sometimes these self-destructive habits make us more sick, and always sickly and not enjoying our lives. But given the high link between our body and our soul, of course, there must be something to do with our self-hate and our overall physical health. But like I said, self-sabotaging is tricky. Sometimes it feels like a series of unfortunate events. A famous example is a famous movie actor. I won't say the name. They get very drunk, of course, by mistake. Of course, we know it's not a mistake. Well, then they ruin their relationship. And while they're drunk, they lose their movie script. So now they lose their job. And then they end up in the house of a prostitute and then they shoot themselves there. Now, this just seems like all a huge mistake. But could this be self-destructive tendencies? Another example could be something like you're late for an interview, or maybe you're going to an exam, but you forgot some of your notes, or you forgot everything you read, for the exam. Is this self-hate? Things to think about. But what makes this self-hate very dangerous is that it is very repetitive. Have you ever seen someone who always gives up when they're very close to success, or someone who always loses their job and has to get another job over and over again, or someone who jumps in and out of so many relationships? Now, of course, it may feel like, this is all bad luck that's happening to me. Why does this always happen to me? But you must think that, could this be self-hate? Because normally the person puts their employer or their girlfriend or boyfriend into such a state that they can't stand this person anymore. Then the other person will get tired of this person and then lay them off or end the relationship. But then the person feels like, this just always happens to me. But it is self-destruction. Next time you see this, then you must think, could this be self-hate, self-sabotage? And we must find a way to unlearn all of these issues. Sometimes it all happens unconsciously. Think of some people, they eat too much, they drink too much, and they're oblivious to the fact that they're killing their body, and they just keep growing fat and fat over and over again. This could be signs of self, right? Sometimes people sleep too little, or they work too little and neglect their jobs. Some work too much. In a way, they're trying to sabotage themselves. Some people then don't want to be around high quality friends. They prefer to hang out with very shallow people and people who can help them feed their destructive habits. Now, of course, it may seem like a person just genuinely loves these people, but it's unconsciously self-hate. Not all the time, but we have to think of it in this light, at least for this video. Sometimes you can look at some people and then you can really see that, this person really let themselves go to pieces. Now, these are signs of self-hate. It could also happen to us if we look at ourselves and you're like, man, I've really let myself go. I need to come back. I need to stop this. So this kind of becomes a spiral because the person is so swamped with self-loathing and despair, and their will to recover is stopped by the heavy weight of all these self-destructive tendencies. So the person, they have this unconscious self-hate, and then when they do the bad habits, then they feel bad about themselves and they hate themselves even more. Remember, the idealized image is now looking down onto the real person, and they just keep doing it over and over again. Of course, everybody has a different cycle, but this is kind of how it happens in general. And once this happens, we enter that cycle where we always deteriorate and deteriorate and deteriorate. So whenever you see this happening to someone or yourself, then don't be mean to them, because we all need help. Be nice to them, be nice to yourself, and see how can we pull ourselves out of this rabbit hole. When we find ourselves going to pieces, we may react in two ways. Some people feel pity, others, they feel very scared and they're terrified. But if we feel pity for ourselves, which happens a lot of the time, the problem is that people feel pity, but then they don't do anything about the action, right? So you must watch out which kind of pity you're having. You should feel pity and then take action. But if you're feeling pity and then you just not do anything, then that is still kind of self-destruction. And also when you're terrified, are you terrified and then it's like you're in shock and then you can't do anything? That is still self-destruction. You should be able to do something and move forward. So even the reactions might be unconsciously keeping you from not getting better. So let us not fall for these tricks, at least now that we know them. It's easier said than done, but this is how we can. Surveying self-hate and its ravaging force, we cannot help but see it in a great tragedy. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of the human mind. Man in reaching out for the infinite and absolute, which is the idealized image I told you about, also starts to destroy himself. When he makes a pact with the devil who promises him glory, because the idealized image promises us solutions to all of our problems, we have to go to hell, and to hell with ourselves. Thank you. And if you like this video, please check out this video, which talks about how the self-hate begins in the first place. Have a good day.